Hello. In the last episode, we had explored the various facets of OCD. Today, let's look at what causes OCD. Welcome to Mindscape Matters, a channel to discuss mental health and more. I am Dr. Mohan Raj. I'm a consultant psychiatrist based in Chennai, and I'll be your guide as we explore this wonderful landscape together. Like most illnesses of the brain, we don't have a complete explanation of what's going on in a person suffering from OCD. In the early days, there were psychological theories trying to explain OCD, but these theories did not have any evidence, nor did they lead to any effective treatment methods. Then came the behavioral model. In this theory, a person gets a thought, for example, that hands are dirty. And this thought makes the person very anxious. And as the anxiety builds up, the person resorts to washing as the only way of bringing down his anxiety. Now, this cycle repeats again and again. Now, this theory led to development of effective behavioral methods of treatment. But this theory also does not explain why the thought happened in the first place. Research into the causes of OCD have examined the brain function, genetics, and environmental factors, and these have provided us with specific findings that will help us to put together the pieces of the puzzle so that we have a larger understanding. Let us look at the first one, genetics. OCD runs in families. The incidence of OCD in the first degree relatives of persons suffering with OCD is higher than the incidence in general population. In the general population, the incidence of OCD is 2 to 3%, but in first degree relatives, it can be higher. The numbers can depend on the studies you look at. Another approach is studying identical twins. Now, identical twins are also called as monozygotic twins because they are formed from the same zygote. Zygote is a cell formed by the union of an ovum and a sperm. Since they are from the same cell, their genetic structure will be identical. There is something called concordance rate in identical twins. Concordance rate means if one twin has an illness, like in this case OCD, how frequently or does the other twin also develop OCD? When they studied the concordance rate in OCD, they found it is 50 to 60%. This shows us that OCD has a genetic factor, but it's not robust, because if it is completely genetic, the concordance rate in identical twins should be 100%. Moreover, the inheritance does not follow any known patterns of inheritance of genetic disorders. The search for elusive gene has not yielded any results so far. There are many genes which can cause OCD, and they interact with the environment in different ways. There are many candidate genes which are being pursued by researchers. What can be concluded is that what is inherited is the vulnerability to develop OCD than OCD itself. The vulnerable brain interacts with the environment and OCD can get manifested. Next, let us look at environmental factors. In individual patients, we have often seen that they develop OCD after a significant environmental stressor. In patients who already have OCD, any anxiety-provoking stimuli can worsen the symptoms. Like children who have OCD will sometimes have worsening just before exam or any other anxiety-provoking situation. But in a larger scheme of things, research has not shown any environmental factor which consistently causes OCD. So we still do not have a clear picture about what are the environmental factors that can cause OCD. That search will persist. Now coming to the function of the brain. We are going to look at the structure and function of the brain in great detail in future videos, but for today, there is a lobe in the anterior front portion of the brain called frontal lobe. It comes behind our forehead. There is an area called orbitofrontal cortex. From here, there are circuits going to the base of the brain to an area called basal ganglia. There are two types of circuits. One is a direct circuit, one is an indirect circuit. Research using PET scans, that is positron emission tomography, have shown that the direct circuits from orbitofrontal cortex to the basal ganglia are overactive in persons with OCD. One more evidence is, after the persons are treated and OCD has remitted, this overactivity is found to have been normalized. One more evidence came in the 1990s when it was demonstrated that children develop OCD after streptococcal infection. Now, streptococcal infection causes rheumatic fever and there will be joint inflammation. One French physician famously quoted in 1884 that rheumatic fever licks the joint but bites the heart. We now have to add it bites the brain too, because for a long time it's known that rheumatic fever also has a consequence of affecting the basal ganglia of the brain and causing a condition called chorea, which is an involuntary movement. In the 90s, it was shown that in addition to the heart disease and chorea, children who have rheumatic fever also develop OCD. This symptom complex is known as PANDAS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders associated with streptococcal infection. This shows that the basal ganglia is also involved in the pathology of OCD. When we go to the cellular level, there are many tracts in the brain. When I say tracts or circuits, these are series of nerve cells called neuron, one after the another. Between two neurons, there is a gap called synapse. Traditional antidepressants which were available from the 50s act on both noradrenaline and serotonin pathway and increase the level of noradrenaline and serotonin in the synapses of different pathways. There was no specific medicine for OCD then. It was observed that whenever these medicines had a little more action on the serotonin pathway, persons with OCD had some benefits. In the late 80s, a new class of antidepressants came out which specifically acted on the serotonin pathway. This group of drugs were called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They inhibit the reuptake by which they make more serotonin available in the synapse. Now, in addition to their action in depression, it was found that persons with OCD also immensely benefited by this group of drug called SSRIs. This again strengthened the notion that serotonin is important in causation of OCD. To summarize what we know till now about causation of OCD, 1, there is a genetic element and what is inherited is the vulnerability and not OCD itself. 2, certain brain areas like the orbitofrontal cortex, basal ganglia and the circuits between them are involved. 3, the neurotransmitter serotonin plays a key role. And 4, environmental factors also play key roles, but exactly how they do it is yet to be studied. Today's discussion also tells us that it's time for us to learn about the structure and function of the brain in greater detail, and we will do that in the next few videos. Thank you for staying this far. If you like this video, please tell 4 of your friends. Tell them there is a Tamil version also. Stay tuned because Mindscape matters. Bye.